I was 13 years old that Thanksgiving morning in Portland, Oregon. My father and I had claimed our traditional viewing spot on Northwest 23rd Avenue, right where the parade route curved past the old brick buildings. We'd been doing this since I was 6. Same spot, same thermos of hot chocolate, same warm blanket to sit on. The marching band from Lincoln High was assembling near us, their brass instruments catching the weak November sunlight. Trumpets blared out of sync as they warmed up. Little kids wearing oversized foam turkey hats bounced around their parents' legs. The air smelled like roasted chestnuts in the vendor cart behind us, mixed with the crisp bite of incoming rain. Typical Oregon weather. Even for a parade day, I was watching a group of cheerleaders practice their routine when I felt it. You know that primitive instinct that tells you you're being watched? It crawled up my spine like cold fingers. I turned my head and saw him across the street, maybe 40 feet away, standing perfectly still while everyone else moved around him like water around a stone. He wore a brown canvas jacket with the sleeves pushed up despite the 40-degree temperature. But it wasn't the jacket that caught my attention. His forearms were covered in raised, circular scars, dozens of them, arranged in neat rows like someone had systematically pressed burning metal into his skin. Each scar was about the size of a quarter, pink and shiny in the overcast light. That wasn't even the worst part. His eyes were locked directly on me with intensity that made my chest tighten. He wasn't glancing. He wasn't scanning the crowd. He was staring at me like I was the only person on that entire street. "Dad," I said, grabbing his sleeve. "That guy across the street is staring at me." Dad looked up from his phone where he'd been checking work emails. "What guy?" I pointed, but the man had vanished, just melted into the crowd like he'd never been there. He was right there. I insisted, my voice rising slightly. Dad patted my shoulder. "It's parade day, kiddo. Lots of strange people come out for these things. Don't worry about it." I scanned the crowd again, searching for that brown jacket, those terrible scars, but found nothing. The parade began with a burst of music from the marching band. Dancers in turkey costumes spun past, floats decorated with artificial autumn leaves and oversized cornucopias rolled slowly down the street. I tried to focus on spectacle, tried to enjoy it like I had every other year, but that crawling sensation never left. I felt like I was being observed through glass I couldn't see. About 20 minutes into the parade, Dad's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. "It's the hospital," he said. Dad was a surgeon, and Thanksgiving emergencies didn't wait for parades to end. "I need to take this. Stay right here, okay?" He stepped away toward a quieter spot near the storefront. Phone pressed to his ear. I remained where I was, surrounded by hundreds of people, yet suddenly feeling utterly isolated. The marching band's music swelled louder, drum lines pounding in my chest. A person in a full turkey costume waddled past, high-fiving children. I watched a little girl in a purple jacket chase after them, giggling. That's when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and my heart simply stopped. He was right there, inches from my face. Those eyes locked onto mine, and up close, I could see something I had missed before. His pupils were completely different sizes. One was massively dilated, swallowing almost all the brown of his iris. The other was contracted to a tiny pinpoint. It gave his face an asymmetrical, predatory quality that my brain screamed was wrong. "I've got something for you," he whispered. His breath smelled like decay and something chemical I couldn't identify. "I don't want it," I said, trying to step backward, but there were people pressed behind me. He smiled, revealing teeth that were blunt and uneven. like they'd been filed down. "Yes, you do," he said quietly. Before I could react, his hand clamped around my wrist like a steel trap. His skin was ice cold through my jacket sleeve. He yanked me backward into a moving crowd with surprising strength. Those burn scars fell hard and raised under my fingers when I tried to pry his hand away. "Dad!" I screamed, but at that exact moment, a float rolled past with speakers mounted on it, blasting a recorded turkey gobble sound at full volume. My voice disappeared into the artificial noise. I dug my heels in, but he was far stronger than he looked. He pulled me through the crowd like I weighed nothing. People bumped into us, stepped around us, glanced and looked away. To them, we probably looked like a father dragging his misbehaving kid away from a parade. No one's eyes lingered. No one asked if I was okay. "Stop fighting," he hissed in my ear. "You're only making this harder on yourself." We reached the narrow alley between Murphy's Hardware and the barber shop. He slammed me into the brick wall, so hard my teeth clacked together, and I tasted copper. The parade was 50 feet away. I could see people laughing, taking photos, eating cotton candy, living normal Thanksgiving lives. But they couldn't see me in this dark gap between buildings. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a butterscotch candy wrapped in yellow cellophane. The wrapper crinkled as he held it up to my face. "Eat this and you'll see the others," he said, his tone almost conversational now. "They're all waiting." "Let me go." I sobbed, trying to twist away. His face spasmed, a violent tic that made the skin around his mismatched eyes twitch. "Eat it," he commanded, looming closer. "They all do eventually. That's the rule." He grabbed my face with his free hand, fingers digging into my cheeks until I felt them scraping against my teeth from the outside. He forced my jaw open. The candy pressed against my lips, and I could taste the cellophane beginning to dissolve on contact with my saliva, which made no sense what was happening anyway. I thrashed, kicked wildly. My heel connected hard with his shin. He grunted but didn't release his grip. I bit down on his finger as hard as I could, tasted his blood, bitter and wrong, but he actually laughed. The sound was high and unnatural. He shoved the candy deeper into my mouth. I was choking on it. The wrapper melted on my tongue like spun sugar, and underneath I tasted something bitter and chemical beneath the sweetness. My legs went weak. The alley tilted sideways, walls sliding past my vision. "Good," he whispered. "Now we can go to the room." I tried to spit the candy out, but my mouth wouldn't respond to my brain's commands. Everything felt distant and cottony. He started dragging me deeper into the alley, toward a white panel van parked at the back entrance. My legs buckled, and I went down hard, scraping my palms raw on the grimy pavement. The van's rear door was already open. Inside, I could see chains bolted to the floor, a stained mattress, plastic sheeting taped to the walls, a camera on a tripod, and photographs, dozens of them, taped up, covering every interior surface. All of them showed girls around my age. All of them had the same blank, hypnotized expression. He was lifting me toward that open door when something hit him from behind like a freight train. We both went down. His grip finally loosened. I rolled away, gasping, that dissolving candy still burning on my tongue. Get away from her. It was Dad's voice, raw with fury I'd never heard before. He was on top of the man, fists connected with his face over and over with wet, meaty sounds. Blood sprayed across the alley wall. The man made an inhuman whining noise, high-pitched and animal. "Dad," I tried to say, but it came out as a croak. The man kept apologizing between blows, saying he thought I was someone else, that this was all a misunderstanding, spinning lies even as his face became a mask of blood. "Help!" Dad shouted toward the street. Someone called the police. People appeared at the alley entrance. First one, then three, then more. Someone said they'd already called 911. Two men grabbed the predator's arms and held him face down on the pavement, so he couldn't run. Dad pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in my life, I saw him crying. Real tears running down his face. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm so sorry I walked away. You saved me." I managed to say, my words still slurred for whatever had been on that candy. Police sirens cut through the parade music. Officers arrived, ambulances too. They tested what remained of the candy in my mouth at the hospital. The detective who spoke to my father said it contained crushed sleeping pills mixed with something else, something that made him go pale and refused to elaborate in front of me. They searched the van, found 7 sets of chains, the photographs, computer equipment. Then they found his house, a basement with more chains, more cameras, walls covered in Polaroids of young girls my age. The detective told my father some of it later. Dad never told me the details, but I saw it change him. He made me see a therapist twice a week. He quit his job at the hospital, so he'd never miss another moment. He did everything he could to help me heal. But I can still see it in his eyes sometimes. The guilt. He blames himself for not believing me immediately, for stepping away to take that call. He thinks he should have prevented all of it. What he doesn't understand is that he's my hero. He found me in that alley. He didn't hesitate. He saved my life. Still pissing yourself over Grandma's campfire stories? Ethan asked as we walked through the entrance to the Turkey Hollow Festival. It was Thanksgiving night in rural Massachusetts, just outside Worcester. Ethan and I had been sneaking out to this fair every year since 8th grade. We were 19 now, home from different colleges for the holiday, falling back into old traditions. The fairground was strung with orange and yellow lights that reflected off the wet grass. Fake autumn leaves have been scattered everywhere, already turning to mush in the New England dampness. The smell of fried dough mixed with wood smoke and cold November air made my stomach rumble despite the massive Thanksgiving dinner I'd eaten hours earlier. "Shut up," I muttered, but my stomach had already tightened with unease. The familiar anxiety was creeping in. This year's theme was local legends and lore. Every booth had some cheesy decoration related to the town's dark history. When we passed the food stalls, Ethan stopped and started laughing. "Dude, check this out," he said, pointing. There was a broken animatronic figure set up next to the turkey leg stand, a butcher drenched in fake blood. A plastic cleaver hung overhead on a wire, jerking back and forth mechanically. The figure's painted smile was fixed in place, eyes vacant and staring. Ethan laughed, but I couldn't. My grandmother's voice was in my head, reciting the same story she'd told me every Thanksgiving since I was 8 years old. Back in 1847, there was a village butcher named Old Ben Tucker. One Thanksgiving, something in his mind broke. He slaughtered his entire family, wife, 3 children, his elderly mother, carved them up in his butcher shop, and cooked their flesh into Thanksgiving feasts he served to the village. People didn't realize what they were eating until it was too late. By then, Ben had vanished into the woods. They never found his body. Some say he's still out there, waiting. Every year, Grandma would lean in close, her papery hand gripping my arm, and whisper, "Stay out of those woods on Thanksgiving night, Devin. That's when old Ben comes back to finish his feast. Ethan grabbed a stick of turkey jerky from the booth. Want some of old Ben's special recipe? You're disgusting. We wandered around for another hour, hitting the spinning rides that made me nauseous, wasting money on rigged carnival games where you could never quite knock all the bottles down. By 11:30, most of the families had cleared out, leaving just teenagers and a few drunk adults stumbling between booths. Want to check out the woods? Ethan asked suddenly. What? Why? Come on, don't be boring. I want to see if old Ben's actually out there. He grinned, but there was a challenge in his eyes. We'd been friends long enough that I knew what this was. He was testing whether I'd outgrown my childhood fears. The woods started about 70 yards past the last booth. The fair lights didn't reach that far. The moment we crossed the tree line, it felt like stepping into a cave. Immediate darkness, temperature dropping 10 degrees. The festival sounds muffled to a distant murmur. This is stupid, I said, turning on my phone's flashlight. The beam punched through the darkness, but somehow made everything seem darker beyond its reach. Let's head back. Just a little further, Ethan said, moving ahead. 5 minutes, then we'll go. All I could hear were our boots crunching on dead leaves, the distant cricket sounds, and my own breathing. The trees were old growth, massive trunks that disappeared up into darkness, branches forming a canopy that blocked out even the faint starlight. We'd walked maybe 200 yards when I heard it. Whistling. Faint at first, off-key, like someone trying to remember a melody they'd half forgotten. It sounded wrong, too breathy, too slow. You hear that? I whispered, stopping. Ethan froze, scanning the trees with his phone light. Yeah. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds, waiting. When nothing happened, we started walking again, but slower now, our lights sweeping back and forth. We'd barely taken 5 steps when the whistling resumed. Louder this time. Closer. Still that same off-key, breathy melody that made my skin crawl. Okay, that's enough, I said, my voice coming out higher than I intended. Let's go back. Agreed, Ethan said, and I heard real nervousness in his voice for the first time. We turned around and nearly collapsed. A man was standing beside an enormous oak tree about 20 feet ahead. 20 feet. Close enough that we should have walked right past him on our way in. But he hadn't been there. I knew he hadn't been there. His face was unnaturally pale in the flashlight beams, almost gray-white like old meat. His clothes were dark and completely soaked with fresh blood that glistened wetly, dripping on the forest floor with soft pattering sounds. His right hand clutched a butcher's knife. The blade was at least 10 inches long. His left hand dragged something through the leaves. A human leg, severed clean at the thigh. The flesh was still slick with blood, the skin torn where it had separated from the hip socket. White bone visible at the top. It left a dark, wet trail through the leaf behind him. The moment his eyes met ours, we screamed. We ran. I've never run like that in my life. I didn't look where I was going. Couldn't with the darkness and panic. My phone flew out of my hand when I crashed through a low branch. I kept moving, hitting trees, tripping over roots, brambles tearing at my clothes and skin. Behind us, I could hear him. Those quick, steady footsteps. Still whistling. And that horrible dragging sound, shick, shick, the leg being pulled to the leaves. This way. Ethan grabbed my arm and yanked me left. We burst through a bush and found ourselves on what might have been a deer path, slightly clearer than the dense woods. I made the mistake of glancing back. He was right there, maybe 20 feet behind us. In the patches of moonlight breaking through canopy, I could see his face more clearly. His skin was pulled too tight over his skull. His eyes bulged from their sockets like they might pop out. His mouth was open, still whistling that awful tune. "Run!" Ethan screamed. My lungs were on fire. My legs felt like they were about to give out. Ethan was faster, pulling ahead of me by a few yards. For one horrible second, I thought he was going to leave me behind. Behind me, I heard a wet thump. I risked another glance back and saw that he'd dropped the leg. He was in a run at full speed now. I pushed harder than I'd ever pushed in my life. Branches whipped across my face, drawing blood. My ankle rolled on a root, pain shooting up my leg, but somehow I stayed upright. I could hear him breathing right behind me, ragged, wet breaths. I could smell copper blood mixed with something rotten, like spoil meat. "There!" Ethan pointed ahead. I could see lights. The fair's back lot, just barely visible through the trees. We ran. Impossibly strong fingers grabbed the back of my jacket, yanking me backward. I twisted out of it, heard fabric rip, and threw myself forward with everything I had left. I burst out of the tree line into the fair's back lot, my legs nearly giving out. Several carnival workers were breaking down booths. A few stragglers walked toward the parking lot. I spun around, gasping, expecting to see him emerge from the woods. But he didn't come. Ethan was doubled over next to me, hands on his knees, face white as paper. "He almost got me," he gasped. "Did you see?" We stood there for 5 minutes, staring at that tree line. Several carnival workers walked past, without even glancing our way. My jacket was gone. My arms were covered in scratches and blood. Ethan's shirt was torn, and he had a cut above his eye bleeding down the side of his face. "We need to call the cops," I said. "And tell them what?" "That we saw old Ben in the woods with a human leg." We called anyway. When the police finally arrived 30 minutes later, they didn't take us seriously. Said we were probably drunk, making up stories, told us to stop wasting their time and go home. They didn't even go into the woods to look. But we know what we saw. We know what chased us. Old Ben isn't a legend. He's out there in those woods, waiting for the next people stupid enough to go looking for him. After 8 months of dating, my girlfriend Amber asked me to meet her family for Thanksgiving. I was nervous, meeting the parents always is, but she seemed even more anxious than me. The drive from Boston took 3 hours through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, winding roads cutting through forests that seemed to close in around us. The whole drive, Amber kept checking her phone and biting her nails. "Are you nervous?" I asked, half joking. "What? No, I just haven't seen them in a while, that's all." She said it too quickly, not meeting my eyes. Before I could press further, we pulled up to her family's house. It was a massive Victorian, 3 stories of dark wood and Gothic windows, sitting alone in a valley with nothing else around for miles. No neighbors, no other houses visible, just this sprawling structure that looked like it belonged in a horror novel. Her father greeted us at the door, wearing a black suit despite it being 4 in the afternoon. "Dad, this is Marcus," Amber said, her voice strained. He shook my hand with a grip tight enough to hurt, making eye contact that lasted just a beat too long. "Welcome," he said. His voice was deeper than I expected, resonating from somewhere in his chest. His wife, Mrs. Chun, was a complete opposite. She practically yanked the coat off my shoulders, smiling hugely, talking at rapid speed about the drive and the weather, and wasn't I handsome, and had we hit traffic. Her eyes never quite focused on any one thing, darting around constantly. "Come meet grandmother," Amber said, leading me into a sitting room. The old woman sat in a high-backed chair by the fireplace, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on nothing. The fire crackled, but she didn't seem to notice. "Hello, Mrs. Chun," I said gently. She didn't respond, didn't even blink. "She has dementia," Mrs. Chun said from behind me. "She doesn't really interact anymore. Hasn't spoken in over a year." Amber took me on a tour, while her mother stayed in the kitchen preparing food. The house was immaculate. Expensive furniture, polished hardwood, artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was perfectly arranged, almost sterile in its precision. We stopped in front of a portrait in the upstairs hallway. An old man with sharp, angular features stared down at us from within an ornate frame. He wore a dark suit, and his smile made my skin crawl. It didn't reach his eyes at all. Those eyes were cold, calculating, like they were measuring everyone who looked at them and finding them wanting. "That's grandfather," Amber said quietly. "When did he pass?" 3 years ago. Cardiac arrest during Thanksgiving dinner." She paused, still staring at the portrait. He was very traditional. Everyone was terrified of him, including Dad. "That's rough," I said, not knowing what else to say. "Sometimes I think he still runs things around here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "Dinner's ready." Mrs. Chen's voice cut through from downstairs, unnaturally loud and cheerful. The dining room table was covered with food: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, 3 types of stuffing, sweet potato casserole, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce rolls, pumpkin pie. The sheer amount of food seemed excessive for 5 people. I was about to sit when I noticed something odd. 6 chairs around the table, but only 5 of us. Amber saw my confusion. "We always keep 1 chair for grandfather," she whispered. "Tradition?" It was strange, but families have their quirks. I let it go. Mr. Chin carved the turkey in complete silence, the knife making soft scraping sounds against the serving platter. Grandmother continued smiling at nothing. Mrs. Chin wouldn't stop talking, filling every silence with nervous chatter about nothing. Weather, traffic, recipes, anything. "Let's say grace," Mr. Chin said suddenly. Everyone joined hands. I took Amber's hand on one side and reached for grandmother's on the other. Her skin was papery and cold. We bowed our heads. "Heavenly Father, we thank you for this meal, for bringing..." The lights cut out, all of them simultaneously, plunging us into complete darkness. The windows slammed open, all of them at once, letting freezing wine tear through the house. The curtains whipped violently. Papers flew from the sideboard. "The candles!" Mrs. Chin shrieked, her chair scraping as she jumped up. We forgot the candles. Mr. Chin followed her toward the kitchen. Amber hesitated, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes that I couldn't interpret in the darkness. "It's fine," she said, but her voice shook. "I'll be right back." She ran after her parents, and I was left sitting there in the dark, lit only by moonlight filtering through the open windows. The wind was so cold it hurt. That's when I realized I was still holding grandmother's hand. She was still smiling, still staring straight ahead. Then she turned her head and looked directly at me. "He likes you," she whispered in a voice that was completely clear and steady. Nothing like a dementia patient. "Grandfather likes you. He's been waiting to meet you, Marcus." I tried to pull my hand away, but her grip tightened. Her nails dug into my skin like claws. "He's sitting right there." She pointed with her free hand at grandfather's empty chair. I looked. The cushion was compressed now, like someone was sitting in it, and on the white tablecloth in front of the chair, I could see handprints appearing, dark, with handprints that definitely weren't there before. They looked like blood. Suddenly, I heard breathing. Above me, raspy, wet breathing. I looked up, and my brain simply stopped processing what I was seeing. Something that might have once been human was clinging to the ceiling. Its fingers and toes were dug into the plaster, and wooden beams like a spider. Gray, mottled skin was stretched tight over visible bones. Its eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light in the darkness. It looked down at me and smiled with too many teeth. "Welcome to the family, Marcus," it said in a voice like gravel scraping over broken glass. I screamed and fell backward out of my chair. I ripped my hand from grandmother's grip, felt skin tear, and bolted for the front door. Behind me, that thing dropped from the ceiling with a wet, heavy thud that shook the floorboards. I could hear it moving, not walking, but scuttling on all fours like an animal. I hit the front door and fumbled with the lock, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I glanced back and saw it right there, just feet away, crouched on all fours. Its face was inches from the floor, neck bent at an impossible angle to look up at me. It was smiling. Drool dripped from its mouth onto the hardwood. The lock finally turned. I threw myself out into the freezing night and ran for my car across the gravel driveway. "Marcus," Amber's voice called from behind me. "Grandfather likes you. He won't hurt you. Come back." I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door, jamming the key into the ignition with trembling hands. Mr. Chun came sprinting from a house. He lunged onto my hood and started punching the windshield with his bare fists. His face was contorted with rage and something else, desperation, maybe fear. "You're offending him," he screamed. "We can't let you leave." "Yeah, I'd rather not be part of this freak show," I shouted back, somehow managing to start the engine. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. Mr. Chin slid off the hood as gravel sprayed everywhere. In the rear view mirror, I saw him and Amber standing in the driveway, watching me leave with identical expressions of disappointment. Amber tried reaching out many times after that. Texts, emails, voicemails. I blocked her number. She showed up at my apartment twice, but I wouldn't open the door. "Marcus, please, I need to explain," she said through the door. I threatened to call the police. She finally gave up, but left one final voicemail about how sorry she was, how she just wanted me to meet him because grandfather still runs a family, and she thought if he approved of me, maybe she could finally leave. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Now I spend every Thanksgiving alone. I haven't been able to date anyone seriously since. Every Thanksgiving night, I sleep with every light in my apartment turned on because I'm terrified I'll wake up and see the thing clinging to my ceiling, breathing above my head, smiling down at me with too many teeth.